Welcome and good evening to the fourth day of Housing Santa Barbara Days 2020 and the seventh workshop in the series this year. Today, we will have Liliana Encinas, who is the bilingual public outreach coordinator with the City of Santa Barbara Fire Department. Welcome, Liliana, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So Liliana will be speaking about emergency preparedness, emergency disaster preparedness. Before we get into that, Liliana, if you could maybe just explain to us what your position is, how long you've been with the fire department.
Absolutely, Jerry. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to bring this education to the community and being part of this great series of workshops. I am the bilingual outreach coordinator for Santa Barbara City Fire Department, but I work under the Office of Emergency Services, which our city's Office of Emergency Services is within the fire department. So I kind of have a dual role with safety and disaster preparedness.
Okay, and I'm sure this year you've had a lot of changes because of the pandemic that we're going through.
Absolutely. It's definitely been a year of change, of modifications, of adjusting, just like it has for everyone. And that does not exclude the fire department.
Okay, well, thanks again for joining us and for preparing the information that you're going to be presenting today. So I don't want to take any more time away from you. I know you have a full presentation. So whenever you're ready, go ahead and share your information and we'll get going on this.
Thank you so much. Okay, I am going to share the screen. So let me know, Jerry, if everything's going smoothly or if I need to do anything else. So I'm going to share the screen and I'm going to put up a PowerPoint presentation that we can follow along with information on how to be better prepared.
Take it away. Right. Thank you.
So we're going to go through this presentation and always feel free to, Jerry, if there's any comments or anything, you can stop and we can absolutely address them. So we're going to talk about disaster preparedness and what our role is as community members, you know, within the pandemic that we're living. So disaster preparedness is no new topic, right? We've heard this over and over again. I think we've heard it a little more this year, right? And so we're going to talk specifically about the types of hazards we have in Santa Barbara, how you can be better prepared, and some community trainings that are available for all, most free of charge. And then we'll leave it to questions at the end. And so we're going to start with emergency versus disaster. So most of the time when I ask people, is there a difference between an emergency and a disaster? And sometimes folks kind of stumble on, if you will, on the differences between one and the other. So remember, an emergency is an unforeseen combination of circumstances, right? And it needs immediate attention, and usually we have the resources to attend to that emergency, right? Different from a disaster, which is a widespread destruction, right? That most likely we will not have the resources needed to attend to that disaster. So basically the difference between an emergency and a disaster is the level of impact and the resources we have available to us. And so with that said, some of the disasters that we've seen in our county, and I mean, some, if we don't even have to go back that long, in the past 2 years, we've seen a grave misfortune between fires, between mudslides, extreme weather, public safety power shutoffs, and even a pandemic, right? So here we highlight some of the wildfires that have occurred in our backyard, right? Which is the Gap Fire, the Zaca Fire, the Jesusita Fire, and the Thomas Fire, right? Which is the most recent one. And there have been some, I want to say, smaller scale fires since the Thomas Fire, right? But they've been pretty significant in our county. And then of course, floods, right? I know it's hard to think of floods with the weather we've been having lately in October, right? Warm weather, some winds, but we really don't think about rain, nevertheless flooding, right? But it does occur. And when we have a lot of precipitation following a wildfire, then we can have potentially a mudslide, right? And so those are some of the hazards we might see, but when some of the areas in the city do flood, it could be potentially dangerous, right? And so just here's some pictures of what has happened in our city of Santa Barbara. And then of course, earthquakes. This is no foreign subject to anyone, right? Here's some pictures of not too recent earthquakes, because we're going to talk a little bit about our history here with earthquakes, but we haven't had a significant earthquake in our county. And we've had some with epicenters either north of us or near us, but not necessarily within our county. And if they are, they're on a smaller scale, on the Richter scale. So here's just some pictures of earthquakes that have happened. And then I went ahead and put this map for you guys. So this map was as of today, right, at about 3:41 in the afternoon. And it registers 1,011 earthquakes that have happened in our region, basically mostly concentrated on the state of California. And as you can see here on this map, our county, which is right about there, has no registered earthquakes. So that's a little concerning because we don't have any activity, which means that, you know, this tension could accumulate, right? And we could potentially get the big one, right? That we have been expecting for so long and that we prepare for each year and we practice in October. Although there is a lot of movement in the state of California and registered earthquakes, here in our county specifically, we have not had any recent movement within the last week, last days, or even the last hours. Some other hazards that could occur in our region would be the potential of hazardous materials spill, or perhaps transportation incidents. And I put some up here for you that have been within our region, like the Sea Cliff incident in 1991. There was the Metrolink accident that happened in 2008, which impacted us because it was right before our fiesta season. And so we did not have a lot of tourists or folks come in. So it impacted our economy very greatly, which is something very similar to what we're living now with the pandemic. And then of course, I also put here when we have extreme weather and when we have snow, what happens to our freeway when the I-5 or the Grapevine is closed. And so we can see a great deal of transportation impact because we only have technically one freeway that takes us in and out of Santa Barbara. And so when it gets highly impacted, then we suffer the consequences. We have more traffic and we have to plan for that as well. And then here's some other pictures of perhaps some tsunamis. We haven't had these recently, but when there is a near source earthquake, or, you know, we've had, when it was the 2011 Japan, we were able to see some of the effects, not immediately, right, but hours later. And so that is always a potential hazard for us. We have a picture of La Conchita mudslide here. I believe this was in 2005, if I'm not mistaken. Of course, the debris flow in Montecito. Then we have the Isla Vista riots on this picture on the bottom. The Refugio oil spill that happened in 2015. And here we see this bee, and you might think, well, why is Liliana putting a bee on there? Well, this is the Africanized bee. And at one point, this bee liked to eat our honeybee. And so it would prey on the honeybee. Therefore, our crops were highly impacted. And then, of course, we always show in our disaster preparedness presentations pandemic. And we never thought that we would actually live it in this year, right? And so the difference between the pandemic or an epidemic, right? The epidemic is when there's an increase in disease above what you normally expect within the region, right? a pandemic is worldwide. So you have that disease, it's increased and it's all over the world. And so now this year, we were very unfortunate and well, we were hit with COVID-19. And so it has impacted us greatly. Everybody has been impacted in some way or another. And so we just want to remind you to continue to do your part of preventing the spread of COVID in our community. And that's by following the guidelines and the suggestions that our public health officials tell us. For example, using a face covering, washing your hands, keeping at least 6 feet apart, avoiding social gatherings, and staying informed. And I actually put here a picture that Santa Barbara County Public Health put about your social circle. And so sometimes we think that our social circles are small, that they're safe, but sometimes they're part of other circles as well. And it doesn't mean that we are exempt from contracting COVID. And so we want to make sure that we remind you as part of your preparedness planning that you also continue to follow these guidelines from public health. So now you're probably thinking, well, what's my role? What do I do as a community member? So you can take responsibility for yourself. And sometimes what I tell folks is we can't control what everybody else does around us, but we can control and plan for what we do. And so it starts with us, and preparedness starts with you and it starts with me. And so creating a plan for you, for your family, before an incident is going to give you peace of mind. It's going to allow you to be better prepared and therefore lessen the impact that it has on your family or on you. And so we do have, a few steps that you can take to be better prepared, which is creating an emergency supply kit. We call it a GO kit. You can do a stay-at-home box. You can do individual kits. Really, it's up to you and your family's needs. Having a plan, and that within the plan, right? Having a plan at home for your car, your work, your school, your pets, transportation, everything that you can think of, including in a disaster preparedness plan. We're going to go a little bit more into detail in a few minutes. And then being informed and staying informed. So a hand crank radio, a battery operated radio, knowing the radio stations that will air during the disaster, all of that is going to allow us to stay informed. And then lastly, getting trained, right? By us getting trained in either, the community emergency response teams, first aid, basic first aid, AED, fire extinguisher training, or even practicing drills. All of these trainings are going to allow us to have more tools in our tool belt for when we need them in case of that disaster. So we're going to start with number one, which is the emergency supplies. You've all heard, right, that the recommendation is between 3 to 5 days of supplies. Well, we tell you at least 5 days, right? Because now with the public safety power shutoffs that might happen, with the disasters or the impact with, the extreme weather and everything that comes along with it, well, you should prepare for longer to be without your commodities. And so including water, non-perishable food, a can opener, and anything that you can add to these emergency supplies and make it more complete and very tailored to your community's needs, the better. And so when you pack your ready kit, sometimes they'll sell the prepackaged ones, and actually I don't recommend them as much as you creating your own, because when you create your own ready kit, it really is tailored to your needs. I personally would not like to eat the prepackaged food that comes in that kit or the prepackaged water. I'd rather pack whatever I'm going to need at that time, or what my children might need, or what my pets might need. So you really want to make sure that you really customize your kit. And so here's some examples of what you can add. And of course, sturdy shoes, blankets, and cash, right? Because the power might be impacted. You might not have access to your ATM. You might not have access to cashiers that run out electricity. So you really might just need plain out cash, right, with small bills or even coins. And of course, your important documents. You will need to provide identity in order for you to receive any disaster-related assistance later on, including if you are going to go to a shelter because you are evacuated, you do need to have an ID with you just to make sure that you are the person you say you are. And within your important document planning or including this in your kit, you want to add your driver's license, IDs, home or vehicle deeds, rental agreements, insurance information, memorabilia or family photos, anything that, you know, can, some of these can be replaced with time, right? But some cannot. So you want to make sure that you have those important documents or memorabilia included in your kit. And then step number 2, we talked about making a plan. And so you want to develop this plan with your family. If you live with family, if you live alone, make sure that in your plan you include an out of the area person that can be your contact person, or friends or neighbors or co-workers, or anyone that's involved in your life that you would like to let them know that you're doing okay, right? And so include a list of important contacts, of course, an out-of-state contact or an out-of-the-area contact that would not be impacted if there's a disaster. Include an evacuation plan and practice your evacuation plan, because we don't do what we learn, we do what we practice. A meeting place outside your home, maybe immediately outside your home and maybe further out. In case you can't return home, you can possibly meet, you know, at a supermarket's parking lot, or at a school, or at a park. Include elders, children, babies, and family members with access and functional needs in your plan. And don't forget your pets. Then share this plan with your neighbors or with loved ones that you want to include in this with having this information. And so some things that you can include in your plan might be where you're going to meet your family members, who your out-of-state contact person is, and very importantly, let this out-of-state contact person know that they are the link, right? Because they are going to serve as that bridge of communication between you and your family members that perhaps are not too far away from where you live, but you cannot communicate with them because perhaps the cell phone towers might be impacted or saturated and your call can't get through, or there's a power outage, or for many other reasons. So make sure that you let them know that that is their role in the emergency. Will you have an extended stay, a shelter in place, or how are you going to evacuate? Are you relying on public transportation, or do you have your own vehicles? Do you have special needs for transportation? How will you escape your home in case there's a fire or any other hazard? Your workplace, your school, your place of worship, what routes, and really think of alternate routes. Some challenges that I tell participants when they go through this course is that challenge yourself if you're going to work, if you're going to school, if you're going to visit a family member, and take alternate routes so you can make sure that you do have those options. Again, transportation, and did you practice your plan? Very importantly. Step number 3 would be informed. And so there's several ways of us being informed, and we all use unique ways of getting our information, right? But very importantly is we have to register to receive alerts, emergency alerts. And so with our county, we have Nixle, which is a texting platform that you can text your zip code to 888-777, and then you subscribe and you start receiving alerts on your cell phone or your mobile device. Then, of course, we have our local TV stations. We have radio stations, we have satellite phones, and then we have verifiable information resources, which are websites that are actually up to date and with correct information. And so I did put a picture here of some of those state resources that we have. For example, we do have a state 211, but we have our own local 211. You know, there's a way to sign up for alerts statewide, but then we also have our local way, and I'm going to go through it briefly after this. But there's all sorts of resources out there. Just make sure that they're verifiable, and that when you share them with your family members or friends, that they're up to date, and that they're actually true, right? That whatever is coming out of these sources. Ready.gov is always a great platform for any preparedness efforts. It's the FEMA website, and it has really good up-to-date information. And here locally, what we do have is we have our Ready SPC is how we sign up for alerts. So I actually put a picture for you guys here. So you see the circle right here. You click here, you register for alerts. You can add your address or a family member's address or a neighbor, and just make sure that you are aware and informed of what's going on and you're receiving these emergency alerts. And that's readySPC.org. And then lastly, I talked about training. So training is a skill set, right, that we acquire, whether it's specific to fire extinguisher or disaster preparedness or whatever it is. And I actually put CERT, which is the Community Emergency Response Team, and I put Listos on here as well, which is in English and Spanish and stands for Ready. This is a more family oriented training on how we can plan at a family level. Both of these trainings are completely free in our county and available. Of course, now with the pandemic, we've made some modifications. Most of them are through Zoom trainings and not in person, but hopefully we'll get to the in-person trainings, and they're a lot of fun. And if you're interested in this, you can always call me at Fire Station 1 in the city of Santa Barbara, and I'm happy to connect you with any of these programs, because these programs are nationwide and all over our county if you live somewhere else. And then just remember that preparedness is a continual process. It's not a one-time event. The key factor is acting rather than reacting, right, to an incident. And so it actually shortens the time between response and recovery. And then it takes steps that end to reduce the impact of the disaster. So that's our overall objective, to reduce this impact, to reduce the stress levels, because you're better prepared. We saw it at the initial stages of this pandemic, right? When there was a shortage of toilet paper. There was a shortage of hand sanitizers or alcohol-based antibacterial or any type of hand sanitizers. We saw a shortage of a lot of supplies because, people go into a panic mode and they start purchasing or emptying the water aisles or, the canned goods or whatever it is. We see it always when disasters strike our community. And that's because of the lack of preparedness and the anxiety that comes with these emergencies, these disasters. And so when you prepare, you maximize the value of lessons learned, right? And that means incorporating training, personal experience, and it really adds value to the experience of others. So I mentioned a few resources. Here, I actually put a whole list of them. If you guys want to take a screenshot of this, or I don't know if this will be available to share with the participants, but these are great resources that you can visit for more preparedness ideas and really start with your plan. And as I mentioned before, it starts with you and it starts with me. We can't plan for everybody, but we can plan for what we're doing and how we are going to react in case of a disaster. And so I think that's about it. I'm going to leave it for some questions or any comments that you might have. Jerry, do you want me to stop sharing my screen?
Yeah, please. Yeah, I think that what we can do is address any questions that come in right now. You bring up a lot of good points, things that we don't think about. None of us ever imagine having to go to a shelter. So, this kind of presentation, just really highlights what you have to think about, because if you do have to leave your house, where are you going to go? Especially if you don't have any family nearby. And like we had, several years ago when we had the roads cut off. So that's definitely something to think about and be ready for that. The other thing was, the hand crank radio, very, very good suggestions. I had a question regarding purchasing goods for your emergency preparedness. I have read in a couple of places where they said it's better to buy things now that you think you might need in case we get to the situation where we were a few months ago, where people were panicking and they were buying more toilet paper than they needed and more canned goods than they needed. What have you got to say about that? What's your opinion, or what have you heard about that?
So about a shortage, Jerry?
No, about purchasing things now instead of waiting for an eventual situation where
you always want to have, and I call it like your stash of emergency supplies. Because what happens is when we go into panic modes, Jerry, we over purchase, right? Which is what we saw at the beginning stages of the pandemic. People were buying toilet paper by, the cartfuls and just really exaggerating everything because it's that panic mode. But if you have a stay box that has the things you might need for about 10, 15 days, whatever you want to plan for according to your family, it's going to bring your stress level low. You're going to be prepared, and you're not going to go out and run to the stores and try to buy everything at once, right? There was a shortage of everything, but because everybody was buying in excess, Jerry, that's what it was. And so the demand was so high that the suppliers couldn't keep up. And then of course there was shutdown, it had a lot to do. But when I speak to some of the folks that were prepared, like with the stay box, they had, several rolls of toilet paper, of paper towels, and they actually, got through it pretty good. And so it really depends on your family's needs and how prepared you want to be, right? I'm not saying like build a bunker or, that kind of deal and go all out. Well, I mean, if you want to do that, that's up to you. But what I'm really saying is just, sit down with your family and really talk openly and communicate on how you can be better prepared. And if you don't live with a family, if you live alone, if you live with roommates, whatever your situation is, make sure you plan accordingly.
Yeah. And that was a great suggestion about actually practicing it, right? Because you do, like you said, what you practice, not what you learn necessarily. It's what you do, the actions you've taken in the past.
Exactly. So. And there was a question, I think it was about the radio ready stations in Santa Barbara County. And so Santa Barbara County did have a very robust program that was called the Radio Ready program. And it was radio stations that had agreements with the county to stay on air and the capacity, right? Because not all of them have the capacity to stay on air in case there's a major disaster. And so that's a program that exists within our County Office of Emergency Management, and some of these, and of course, radio stations change, right? But some that I was able to look up that would have that capacity. For example, here in the South Coast, there's 94.1, there is 107.7 in Spanish. I mean, there's quite a few that you would have on and have that capacity. And so I invite our attendees, our participants, to go to the Santa Barbara County website, look up Radio Ready, and then you can see some of the radio stations that would be available during a disaster. But again, our local news, and now a lot of people use social media platforms as a way of saying, hey, I'm safe. And there's actually like a little flag on Facebook that says, mark yourself safe. I mean, some use it as kind of, jokingly and whatnot, but it could be a tool to mark yourself safe and let your family members or your friends know that you're okay. An anecdote that I always like to share when I do these presentations, the perfect example is Hurricane Katrina. When those hurricanes hit, I mean, they hit hard and the impact is tremendous. And when Hurricane Katrina impacted, there was a lot of families that were separated because they would go to their rooftops to seek help. The helicopters would come and pick them up, but they would not necessarily take them all to the same location, to the same shelter. So they would be separated. Children would be separated from their families. And in some cases, there were children that were separated for months and even more than a year without knowing about their family members or how to even reach them or locate them, because, you know, it was an unforeseen and a widespread destruction, and there was not that planning. And so I always use that example, and I say, you know, even the youngest member of the family, of course, if they have the capacity to know these emergency contact numbers, to be included in the plan, as well as the oldest member of your family or of your household or your roommates or whatever your situation is. Everybody needs to know that plan and who to contact in case there's an emergency.
Okay, thank you. Lots of great suggestions. And just a reminder, this is being recorded, and in about a week's time, it will be available on the housingsantabarbara.org website. We will be subtitling it in Spanish as well, so that persons of both languages can enjoy it and use it for planning purposes and to get ready. And hopefully we don't need it, but it's always good to be prepared. Thank you very much, Liliana. I do want to remind everybody that tomorrow is our final workshop in the Housing Santa Barbara Days 2020 series. It will be on home ownership programs, and we have three great presenters. Maria Schroeder who is a housing program specialist with the City of Santa Barbara Community Development Department. Andrew Kish, who's with Property Management and County of Santa Barbara, and Yvette Lounsbury, who is a home buyer loan administrator with the Housing Trust Fund of Santa Barbara County. So we have the person that can help with the loan, and we have the two persons from both the City of Santa Barbara and the County of Santa Barbara who will explain the home ownership programs and answer any questions that you might have as well. So that will be the final one this week, and it will end our Housing Santa Barbara Days 2020 for this year. Tomorrow at 5:30, same place, same time. And again, thank you, Liliana. I don't think we have any other questions. So with that, we will conclude tonight's workshop. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. And it's always a pleasure. I definitely missed everyone in person, but it's a unique situation. So stay safe and let's be prepared.
All right, take care. Good night, everybody.
Good night.